It's going to be Ash Wednesday tomorrow. It's going to be Valentine's Day. We've got Chinese New Year. Apparently, I've been informed by one of our clients it is Year of the Dog. So who let the dogs out? No, we won't go there. Anyway, welcome everybody. This is the person's user group. As most people know, the VIP Club annual membership allows everyone to have personal indicators and the scans. And one of the things that came out was the JP finally trilogy scans and radar screen alerts, which was pretty awesome. If you're not familiar with it, simply get a hold of Mary at mperson@personsplanet.com. So that's one of the announcements that we wanted to make. Also, as we get through, I think I just skipped something here that was fairly important, and it's this slide right there. We have the trilogy scans were here. The files were sent to everybody for VIP clients. Next Wednesday, oops, there it is. Next Wednesday, I'm trying to get a little drawing, click that out. Next Wednesday will be our algo class, February 21st. It's a Wednesday, not a Tuesday, but yet a Wednesday. So full packed month here. I don't know if you think about it, the month just started and we're already talking about the 21st, right? A week from now, so, or a week and a day from now. So that is kind of one of the things that are that we're going to get into in this webinar. So is looking at what's coming up for the schedule for the year. Again, don't forget the 19th is President's Day, so that's why we're moving instead of a Tuesday. We all get a day of rest on a President's Day weekend, and then I guess there's the New York Traders Expo at the end of the month, and that concludes pretty much the monthly schedule. All right, so we got that out of the way, and let's get into the persons last week. One of the things that we did, we introduced everyone to how to, at least, or not last week, excuse me, last month, how to build or add to your radar screen. And by inserting a blank row, obviously would help, and creating label rows. And therefore you could create whether or not you are going to have your own trades, your own sectors, your own, like for example, pot stocks or seasonal buys, seasonal sells, crypto FX kind of things in that regards, or guns and ammo like I have. Obviously it says what it is. So everyone knows how to create by looking at last month's function of the PUG users recording. And this week, what we wanted to get into is a few questions of what's really the big difference between how do we utilize scans and what is on our board, and how do you get the most out of this radar screen function, whether it's the current version or whether it's the new VIP, which has the last conditional trend change indicator. I'm going to cover a little bit of both, so this will just give a little difference of what's going on here. How I utilize this today in the trading room, many of you are familiar with. One of the things that I like to do is to look at stocks short term. So whether I have it set on a 60-minute, and one of the things you do is if you want to change this to 15 minutes for equities, simply go on to your little change interval clock, and you can see it's synced to 60 minutes. If I change that to 15 minutes, which I'm not going to do right this second because then it'll want to refresh all these stocks and all this data. So if I'm more interested to find out the health of the market or a specific sector that I'm looking in. So just to start, and then we'll finish. The scans are running right now. This morning we came into our pre-market briefing, and one of the things that we noted was that we had a last conditional change in two companies that were interesting to us. One was Cara Therapeutics, which was a biotech name, and only because it had closed greater than a last conditional change. Another stock that we were interested in was Alaskan Airlines. Alaskan Airlines also, as we were giving out this morning, I stated that this stock had a big increase in the volume, and the volume on a weekly basis, and had a nice little breakout. And then today, you know, we saw a nice performance to the upside for that particular name. All right. So what I was also looking at was to say, well, it's interesting to see those types of breakouts, but we also had a lot of names in the steel sector populate buy signals. U.S. Steel for one. We had Zeus, Z-E-U-S, for two, and Zeus exploded on the scene today. We had CRS, Carpenter Technology, Schnitzer Steel, SCHN. All of these were heavy concentration in yesterday's buy scans. So what I can do is when I get something on a buy list, so for example, if I go over here to the buy list and I look at 212 and I scroll down to basic materials, I'll probably have a few of those names. There's Schnitzer Steel, as we pointed out. We would have Carpenter Technology, CRS, as pointed out. There's Zeus, as pointed out. So, I mean, I kind of know these companies. And then last but not least, look at this guy down here, Nucor. All right. So I can, and then finally, there's X. They were all there on the scans that we put out in this morning's briefing, which is one of the things that I like to do first thing in the morning for the trading room. So where did I get these ideas? Well, I ran a scan, and there they are. I got a heavy concentration of steel stocks today. And so what we can do is we can just, write those names down, or if you want, if there's only a few in the basic material sector, simply go on up the list till you don't want any more of them, and you can leave it right there, BHP Bulletin. Let's just go there, and then just hit copy. And then if we go into our advanced trading system, and we're going to scroll down, and then the sector that I'm looking in, obviously, one of the things that I can do is insert a label row and say daily scans, and then just hit Control V. As soon as I hit Control V, everything that I copied came right into line right here. So what does that do for me? Well, for one, if we have the relative strength person's market catcher, as soon as it gives it a couple minutes, it's got to fill in data. You will note that you can start to selectively look for like Nucor, and we'll pick Nucor out real quick. We're going to pick on Nucor. This morning, Nucor, if you notice, it had a daily signal, the trend is up, and it had formed a daily high closed doji. The only difference is that Nucor, out of the group, had a neutral reading based on the last conditional change. So basically, what does that mean? It means that while it did have a buy signal, it didn't break out of a last conditional change resistance. And here is how we have calculated that. If this is a last conditional change and it is in a buy mode, this is, as you can see, a high closed doji. Let me get this filtered into view for you so that you can see that this morning, here's a high closed doji and a PPS. Hey, that's great. It's a great buy signal. The only thing that was wrong with this is that the relative strength had just started to improve slightly. There's a fuchsia color, and it had not broken out of its resistance. So my comments this morning was I would wait for a better quality and to see if Nucor breaks out of that resistance. So by looking at the quality of the scan or the buy signal, you can clearly see, and whether you use the radar screen to do this or visually, U.S. Steel, if you look visually, when we came into the day, you will notice that U.S. Steel had closed above its last conditional change, and guess what it did? It had follow through. So that's kind of, I think, an edge that we will have as traders, is that the trilogy, something we worked hard in getting, number one, together, and that's why we have it as a independent scan in of itself. So you can clearly see Trilogy scans, buys, and sells. Currently, it just generated, and it already fulfilled its scans, which I'm running for your information, all NYSE. I'm in the current mood of finding out if there's a concentration of stocks in the NYSE. Super value, Pure One imports, not a lot generated daily traditional sell signals based on a Trilogy sell. Again, what is a Trilogy sell signal? Pretty much it is a last conditional change where the market generates a sell signal, breaks a trend, and closes lower. In addition, we added a different filter, which is that it's also in a weekly sell. So it's a continuation pattern with higher filtering methodology that gives us a better rate of saying this is a sell signal that is in a continuation pattern. So it is pretty significant on how we programmed the Trilogy setups. What's really neat is that you can change what you want to scan by hitting format. The more I ask of it, the more I'm asking my computer to work. So if I'm asking for multiple scans to go on at once, like I am doing right now, I probably do not want to run one scan for 7,000 stocks when I'm running all of these scans at once. So if I want to be more specific and say, you know, I'm going to just use Trilogy buy and sells, then guess what? Then those are the two that I would use along with high and low close, or wait till all of my daily scans are concluded and then go back and run a heavy concentration of indexes like the NYSE, the NASDAQ itself, and the S&P 500 and run those scans on the Trilogy. So there's two ways. One, there is a way that we can run the scans and find out what's the quality of the market, number one, and where is the concentration of buy or sell signals coming from. So that's pretty, in itself, is an amazing functionality of this program. So I think, for one, if we are looking at what classifies as a better buy signal, obviously closing greater than resistance, even if it's only by a tick. Remember, one tick is greater than, it's not equal to. Equal to is no good. It needs to be greater than. Greater than is an algorithmic change of value, and that's why a last conditional change has been acting, and I think it is a significant change in the marketplace, whether you're using it as a stock finder or even as a day trade. For example, in day trading, let's go and look at today's end of day action. Here's a 15-minute interval, and I have 15-minute interval for the futures. The E-mini mid-cap. One of the things that we want to take a look at here is, and this is not filled in because I put this in myself, but notice the EMD and the last conditional change is bullish. So that helps qualify what the signal is. It's a bullish breakout on a 15-minute basis. So even for day trading, let's look at the 15-minute chart and go back and say, well, what's going on? So the 15-minute on the the Russell, or excuse me, we want to take a look at EMD. I clicked on the wrong one. I don't want to bait and switch. My bad. So let's look at the, as it populated on the screen, it was in a PPS buy mode. It had resistance. It closed greater than the resistance, and we had follow-through. Now, not great follow-through. I mean, you know, the market gave positive momentum to the upside. I don't think anyone would complain with a profit of any magnitude, whether it's a day trade or a position trade, but it definitely gave a better quality of a buy signal in that case. Now, as we go down and we look at perhaps the NASDAQ, and we notice that it says neutral. So it was in a buy mode, and it says neutral. So why is it in a neutral mode? So when we take a look at the 15-minute, you go, well, let's see. At the same time it generated a 15-minute buy signal, or a high closed doji ensued, it didn't go anywhere. In fact, look, it's neutral because neutral reading is between the support and the resistance. If we're going to be a buyer, I want this thing to generate a buy signal and break out. Like, for example, if this is a buy signal and this is the last conditional change, I want it to close greater than the last conditional change, which came in the next bar, and there's momentum. So there is now a better way of defining, not just for position trades, but for even day trades, of using the last conditional change. One of our clients has, because they made a very good observation. John, my eyesight's not that good to differentiate between white and gray, and I changed the color. So whether you have the VIP package, which allows you to look at the scans or see this on the radar screen, you still have last conditional change on your charts. So if you just right-click on the indicator, which is a line, so watch this. If I line my mouse up, the hand, over the gray line, and I click on it, and I click on it, there we go. It says Format J-Person LCC Bearish. If I click on that and I change and go straight up to the top tabs, General, Inputs, Alerts, Style, Color. So you can see that the box that's gray is highlighted. Guess what we can do? This particular client, not to confuse the red probably with daily pivots, changed the color to their liking and made it fuchsia. If I hit OK, it changed the last conditional change resistance to the fuchsia color, and the last conditional change support is still white. So therefore, it's a little more clearer to see a last conditional change closing breakout buy signal. Here's one right here, a last conditional change buy signal, and on an upside movement with confirmation in volume, whether you use the on-balance volume indicator, or if we right-click and we go to Insert Analysis Technique, and find, if you have for VIP, the volume indicator, there it is, and hit OK, and hit OK, and there it is. So we now have the volume indicator, which the on-balance volume indicator at this point in time is on an uptrend, and our indicator is also on an uptrend. Not very strong, which told us that maybe this isn't going to be the greatest move since sliced bread, but we might get something out of the trade on a move up. So that's exactly what this indicator did. It did a better job in defining that the move wasn't going anywhere. In fact, after it had a little bit of an upside move, 20 points in the NASDAQ, it kind of petered out. So in any event, there are ways of reading what the indicator is about and how to get more traction out of the radar screen. So whether it's from a day trade perspective or whether you're using it for scans. Once you capture that data, and keep in mind right now the scans, the daily scans that I took up are slow in populating the data because currently we're running our scans, and I've got one too many programs open, so let me close one. I'm going to close this particular workspace here, and I have nothing to change or to, yes I do, I wanted to save, I added a symbol here, and I'll go there. So now, more or less, when I look at a symbol and I go, wow, here is a daily scan which generated not just buy signals, but the trend was up, and if it's neutral, it tells me that it might not be one of the greatest trades in the world. But if it's breaking out and or it closed greater than a last conditional change, I may consider looking at that as a daily trade within my plan. So I would be looking at those particular names on my daily list. So here was Zeus today. As you can see, Zeus did not close greater yesterday than the last conditional change, but it sure did today. So buying resistance to the left, is my old saying, prompts buying pullbacks to the right. What does that really mean? It means the market broke out, so instead of buying the breakout, I will be looking, because if a market is to start moving and accelerating up, we should see higher highs and higher lows, which means we should see a pullback tomorrow, right? So it has cleared the last conditional change resistance. We have now pivot. It should pull back a little bit with the concentration in the entire sector. If it pulls back, I'll be looking for buying a pullback in Zeus tomorrow. If you want to take a look at that stock on a longer term basis, all you have to do is minimize and go and look at your weekly chart and say, gee, is this stock capable of moving higher? Where has it been? Where has it come from? It had a pretty nasty tumble over the last week and a half with the rest of the market, and now we're starting to see a more substantial rally. Now, if we can clear weekly pivot, boy, I think this thing could get some real traction. How does the volume look? Well, whether you're using on-balance volume, and by the way, if you ever, and a client had this happen to him. He came in and he thought his charts went away. Something happened to the scaling is all. If you go disable and restore original scale, it'll put your charts back in format. If you alter whether or not it's a bar chart, we'll put more data, historic data, so you can see all the way back. If you change it to a candlestick up here, it will obviously, because they're fatter, it requires more real estate space on your chart. It will require more space on the charts, and then you'll have to use this toggle switch here. If the arrows point in, it means bring in more data. If the arrows are pointing out, it says increase bar spacing. It spreads things out so that you can see it a little more readily handle there. Okay? So, moral of the story, you can start to see how, like, for example, even looking at a buy signal here, we had a buy signal. Things don't really move, and then, you know, you got a buy signal, but there's this big gray last conditional change. A close over there got some upside in the market. A close over a last conditional change got some upside in the market. So the last conditional change, whether you're using it from the scan functions, and I'm just sharing with you a couple things. The next last conditional change on Zeus is up here at 25. Boy, if it clears that, I would imagine 28 to 30 range would be the next target up against these highs and that old high right there. So anyway, I'm not focusing and promoting Zeus. It's just a stock that showed up on our radar screen today, along with U.S. Steel and the entire steel sector. So obviously there's something there with President Trump's administration building proposals, so steel stocks and maybe other news about tariffs and things of that nature came into play. I just want you to know how to get the most out of running a scan, number one, how to change and be more maybe market specific, sector specific by clicking on, and I'll do this one more time just so that we know, if you click on a scan that you want to change the settings, go to Format, go to, at the top you have your name, symbol universe, scan criteria, schedule, results, and by the way, if you hit schedule, you can hit schedule scan to run automatically, click on that, run it daily, at whatever time. I choose to start it at 4:06 p.m. to give it a little minute or two for the market to settle and get closing prices in, and then it starts the scan process for all my symbols. If I don't want any of these choices, and if I want to kind of go more top or bottom up specific, I can go to TradeStation symbol lists, I can go to index component lists, I can go to indexes, I can go to industry groups, and then start searching in a specific group to find out what's the best looking stock. Now, what's the best looking stock in a specific space would be to run that scan. I would want to also filter it out with two functions, two features. One feature would obviously be the relative strength to find out if the market is in a fuchsia, it means it's improving against the S&Ps, or blue, meaning it's already outperforming the market. So those are number one. And number two, one of, I think, the best combination is to look for a relative strength, a market sector or segment or stock that's outperforming, which would be blue with a green moving average, which means if it's bright blue with a white moving average, what that signifies is it just today or it's just began to outperform the market, and that the moving average has not had more than it's lagging. But a bright blue with a green moving average means it has been performing and it's starting to increase in outperformance. That combined with a buy signal means that the market is relative to the S&P starting to outperform, and we have a buy signal, which, by the way, here we have the Qs blinking. So let's take a look at the daily Qs and see how that all kind of lines up. Well, the Qs have been outperforming the S&Ps. They didn't fall as much percentage-wise. And number two, they are now back into a high close doji, a PPS. And what's the main problem with this? We're right up against a last conditional change resistance. A close over that may help give us an upside momentum shift in the marketplace. So we are seeing a little bit of increase in volume by barely a nudge of just today. So I just wanted to bring that into focus for you. So by looking at the quality of buy signals, you can make better trade decisions, such as if we have, like back over here, a market, a gray line in the sand, a high close doji, and all the way down, if I run this straight, you can see the volume started to move up, the relative strength improved, the on-balance volume looks healthy, and the momentum chart looks great. So even back at the beginning of the year, the technology sector had launched. So if we get the same type of consideration here, so as some feel that perhaps the market's going to crash and go to zero, if we close greater than the last conditional change, we have momentum turning positive, volume coming back into the game, the relative strengths outperforming S&Ps, and if we get an improvement in volume, then it would signify that we have at least more upside left into the NASDAQ 100. Now, I never would recommend anyone to ever use the person's market catcher on the S&Ps against the S&Ps because it's looking at the performance relative to the S&Ps. And that's what this indicator is all about. All right? So using this radar screen, it will tell me an enormous amount of information immediately. What's the strongest sectors? Where are we in relationship, as I have stated before, how I utilize this myself. Where are we in something I don't want a lot of anyone to forget how to use? Where are we in the relationship of longer-term pivot support or resistance? Where are we in relationship to monthly support or resistance? And if we just take our mouse and we can scroll down, we can see at least on a quarterly basis, or looking at pivots on a quarterly, and we're just halfway through the quarter, you will notice that for the most part, there's a lot of stocks and sectors that as you can see, the color is blue. It means that that particular stock or ETF or instrument is trading at the prospected quarterly pivot. In fact, let's just click on that and go to our monthly chart and see if that's true. This is Lennox International, and lo and behold, there's the quarterly pivot, and you can see we are trading just above the quarterly pivot right now. Had we been trading below that pivot, it would have been, of course, red and shown that it's less than. So we have everything here color coordinated so that we can identify where are we in relationship to our time frame pivot support and resistance targets. A lot of information for what you want specifically for your trading. If you're just day trading futures, then your future short-term page will be your best friend. In fact, you have this that you can change your interval, as I just mentioned how to do that. Again, going to this icon changes your interval, whether you want for day trading 5 minutes, and you can look at all of your stock indices, and then you can look at what your daily trend is, your daily signal, whether you have a daily high and low close doji, what your pivot status is, bullish or bearish. This window, or these columns right here that I'm outlining, reflect the information you're asking for this interval of time. So on a 15-minute basis, the market trend is up. There is no new signal. The last conditional trend shows it's bullish because the EMD broke out. There is no high close doji, and the daily trend was down, meaning blue was below gold on the daily pivot. So what does that mean? It means that for day trading purposes, if we get near the pivot support, maybe look for some buying opportunity, and looking at whether or not we have buy signals. What are those buy signals? So that's one way from a discretionary standpoint, a discretionary trader to say, by the way, we also can utilize that information as far as the color coding with the pivots. So here's an example, corn. Today, corn is stuck at its daily pivot point. Let's take a look. This is the intraday chart, so let's take a look. And there it is. It is stuck at its daily pivot point. Didn't move, really came up, just came right down near the daily pivot point. So there it is. It's telling you exactly the kind of information that you want to need, or you may need for identifying, is this a good sell signal if we're above pivot, or would it be a better sell signal below the pivot? And so that at least gives you confirmation that if you know the color coordination, I can immediately address how many stocks or commodities do I want to look at if I understand and train my eyes as to what these columns all represent. Daily high and low close doji, the daily trend, buying or selling against support, and the quality of the buy signal with the new function of the last conditional trend identifier. And I think this was a pretty awesome, I mean, really a very powerful, it's amazing the fact that we can regard a buy signal as, or a sell signal as bearish because it closed below a support, or a buy signal or a sell signal as neutral because it didn't break resistance or it didn't break support. Let's take a look at what we were defining there. Bean oil is an up signal and neutral, and if you take a look, there it is. I mean, that's pretty neutral, right? I mean, how cool is that, that it defines the buy signal here. The market wasn't a buy. It's a 15-minute, and immediately I know it's a neutral or it's sideways because it's stuck between a resistance and a support. And we just changed the color to fuchsia for resistance, and we kept white for support. So that's kind of like, whether I'm trading bean oil or not, it's helpful information to know how good is this, the buy or the sell signal. When I take a look at soybeans, it has a down market trend. We're in a 15-minute time frame, so look at the 15-minute, and it's neutral. there it is. It's in a sell signal. There's the sell signal, and it's trapped between a resistance and the support, and it is a sideways market defined right. Instead of having to look at a chart, it's labeled for you right there. So feeder cattle, it's flashing that it may generate a again, so everyone knows, I'm just clicking on things as I see them. This is, again, we're on a 15-minute interval, so let me look at a 15-minute chart. So here is the 15-minute chart. It says it's both a PPS buy and a high close doji, but it's neutral. Why? Because it didn't close greater than the last conditional change. So I can say, well, let me look at that, and if we get a breakout, now not all the time do we get last conditional change as the epitome of resistance, but a lot of times we do. They get right up to that last conditional change and then they fail. Other times they break out and we can say I can buy there and put my stop underneath the bar that got me in, the breakout bar, and that should be my stop. And then be able to determine when to get out of the trade. So, or trail my stop underneath a last conditional trade. You know, we did that today in crude oil. Based on a 5-minute in the trading room, which was kind of neat to look at the trade in crude oil. And we'll get the 5-minute chart up just to get an example in the trade room today. We were looking for the market to break out above 77. And then the one tick above, I think it was right in here, if I'm not mistaken, 58. No, it was right here, excuse me. It was right there. Last conditional change in the trade room. And what I identified was that we had this huge area of resistance right there. And the market had this last conditional change, a gray line. It broke out, it failed, it came back up, it failed, it failed. I said, gang, if it breaks and closes, and it did it by, again, one tick. One tick is not equal to, it's greater than. One tick. The stop was underneath is exactly how I played it in the trading room. And based on a 1-to-1 risk-reward ratio, I said, gang, this may go up and just hit stops on a 1-to-1, scale out. And then we raised our stop. We raised our stop to 94. And everything looked, I thought it would stop us out. It went back up, it came down, it went back up, and then puked, and it stopped us out, and then continued to move up. But we played that nice 5-minute double bottom on that particular trade based on a W bottom pattern on higher on-balance volume, and we waited patiently, and we were disciplined to go with the trade. Very small risk and a nice reward, and we trailed the stop. So, you know, sometimes they knock us out by a tick. Otherwise, we would have kept that in there, maybe depending on the market's conditions. Sometimes it gets a little jittery. It was not a true bullish market today. One of the reasons why, it's still a bearish market environment. Funny thing is, American Petroleum Institute report came out, and look where the price is. I mean, no harm, no foul. So it was a nice day trade based on not emotions. It was a nice day trade based on what you guys have here and how to utilize this feature, which is your number one thing, is to make money. So the tools here to help you identify when a market can move, the conditions in what gives us the edge in seeing an upside, and the best edge was the fact that it had that close greater than that 77 with the risk underneath the last conditional change with an uptick in positive volume. And that's exactly the setup today. So apart from that, I think that looking at PUG, we had a few questions. Number one, what's the difference between the VIP and why and how can people get this and why should they be VIP? And it's real simple. You have a lot of different tools for VIP. The last conditional change, for example, the scans, the volume indicator. PMC is also available as a VIP, but as a disclosure, let me add that on Thinkorswim, remember carefully that on Thinkorswim, we added the PMC indicator, has been added and was launched supposedly last week. I'm sure the only way you would have heard about it was from our webinar that we introduced. I think it was in a webinar we did last week. So I'm not sure they're going to do a big hoopla about it, but I do know that a couple guys over there think it's a pretty cool tool, and we'll see if they start using or talking about it, because it really does do a wonderful thing for equity traders. To give you the relative strength and the performance and the condition and the stage in which the market's in. Weak, lagging, leading, improving. Those 4 stages are really helpful. In fact, today, if I may be so bold, and I'll scroll down and see if we have, let me see, and go up to technology real quick. Let me look at, I'll pick on Alaskan Air, because Alaskan Air was one that, ALK, that we talked about in the scans today. It had a daily buy. The LCC was bullish. Now, keep in mind, if you notice a distinct, it may not be distinct enough, but if it's solid and darker green, that means it did, past tense, generate a buy. If it's blinking and bright green, it means it is in a currently, based on the close, a new fresh daily buy, and it broke out on an LCC. Now, what's really amazing about, instead of focusing on Alaskan Air, as you can see, the Alaskan Air's relative strength is fuchsia with the white moving average, which means it's improving, not outperforming. Let's take a look at Alaskan Air real quick, and I'll show you what I mean by that. It is improving. The relative strength is not outperforming. The relative strength weakened. It was diverging as the market was making a new high. Up here, it was showing, whoop, we got issues. The market is in a weakening condition. And then, of course, we had a downdraft. As the market has moved into this zone over the last week, the relative strength has improved. We had a daily buy signal, and we had upside momentum. So that's positive. All right. Now, what's better than that is what's forming or formed today, both with JB Hunt and CHRW Logistics, JB Hunt Trucking Company. So let's take a look why. Because the relative strength has never really been a couple days red. It went down. Today, on the close, a high close doji, and it closed greater than the last conditional change with relative strength improvement. Momentum is strong, and so JB Hunt, more importantly, has a very strong potential tomorrow to see some upside gain. Where would I, obviously there's a big old pivot blue thing staring us straight in the face, which may act as a little bit of resistance. So tomorrow, if we get a maybe slightly lower open, we know that we could possibly see an upside move, and if it follows through and makes a newer high, we should clear and at least test that high and get a little bit of upside out of JB Hunt based on these technicals, that uptick in volume, and the fact that it cleared resistance. It made a greater close than the past week. So JB Hunt already started a downdraft with a low close doji. It began before the equity indexes last week broke down. This stock is already moving up above resistance. All of that information came from just looking at this radar screen right here. Is the market in a bullish breakout above a last conditional change? Yes. Is it in an improving, outperforming mode based on the relative strength? Yes. Is there decent volume? JB Hunt, its average 10-day volume is 1 million. It did 930. So I'd have to say it was on an okay volume. So not a major breakout, but I would have to say CHRW, same condition. And all of that information comes from the radar screen based on the work that we've done. So we can go up and down by collating and double clicking on the strength or on any column here and find out whatever you want to find out. I want to find out how many stocks generated a fresh new daily buy signal, high close dojis. Double click on it. If it's blinking, only one UNG generates a brand new daily high close doji, UNG. So UNG is the only thing that generated a brand new daily buy signal off the radar screen. So that is one of the major considerations for using the product, using the scans, finding out, again, starting from a very top-down. I always have to re-emphasize, a top-down approach starts with looking at if you're a stock trader, looking at your top stock, 6 stock indices. The spiders, the Qs, the diamonds, the Russell, the NASDAQ, and the NYSE. In addition, we have them set at day charts. If you go up to your time interval and you see the interval has a symbol is green, which means if I make another chart, it's going to be green. I can click on that and not link it. But the intervals are all blue, and that's this little I, interval window. It's all linked. And so why do I do that? Because if I click on this and I change to a weekly mode, and then I have to independently, because it just got everything out of sync, go and bring everything back into focus. A couple things you'll find that, at least for me as a technician, which I find pretty significant, is the way the market moved last week, and as far as the weekly change, week-to-week change, the week-to-week breadth indicator. A couple things occurred. Number one, while the market did go down, and I get it, from this to that, it went down, and from that to that, it went down 2 weeks in a row. In 2 weeks in a row, we did get a move down, but as we started to pop back up, the breadth of the market is coming back to where it was on a week-to-week basis. If this week, the weekly breadth analysis closes greater or back up at its highs for most of these indices, it leaves the credibility that prices could go back up and at least challenge or test the highs one more time. In fact, that is information based on this chart package that gave me the inclination to want to take a position in the Russell, and over the next 6 weeks, 36 days at the time, we were trading at or near the 3-quarter, that gold line, which is 9-month pivot support. 9-month pivot point support is what we were at. Now, it's kind of funny. I had an email from the director of education at TradeStation, who a client sent in a question. During Mr. Person's morning briefing, stated the Russell was at a 9-month support. So I said it is a quarterly pivot point moving average. Obviously, I didn't say what it really, the 3-month. So she's going back, and I guess the lady had asked, I don't understand. 9 months, and I said that equates to a 9-month pivot point support, typical price. So if you go back on a pivot, high-low close divided by 3, you take 1, 2, 3, add them up, divided by 3, and there's our pivot support. So the gold line generated a 3-month, current quarter, 1, 2, 3. The average typical price of the 3-period pivot is that gold line. So I looked at that, and I also stated we'll look at last quarter's pivot point, which is blue, and the old highs up here. The market came back to support. We have a higher high and a higher low in the breadth on the Russell. It overshot the runway, so to speak, and it may see, based on that pattern, it could see further upside. So that's why I think, in fact, also one additional study was looking at, of course, the seasonality. And by the way, if your on-balance volume tool does not come into focus, right-click, Format Analysis Technique, hit on-balance volume, go to Format It, go to Scaling, and reset it at auto scale based on data range on screen, hit OK, and close. On-balance volume is one of the very few tools with multiple products. Even Genesis has the same issue where somehow it gets out of scale, and it's probably because it's trying to calculate the moving average, etc., etc. Anyway, by looking at technical analysis and looking at the way the market, or at least using this information, when I look at the advanced decline analysis making higher lows, and I see the volume making higher lows, trending higher, while my volume indicator down below did have a moving average cross, it still shows relative to the last area. If you notice the last area, it is still higher. So it is still showing a functioning higher volume pricing structure, which means that the actual longer term trend is still intact. Now that doesn't mean it can't rally and fail and chop around and do nothing for a while, but I feel that based on the breadth and the volume that we have a solid shot at recovery in the Russell, which could outperform the S&Ps. And if this week, Friday, we actually do rise and make a new high in the breadth, then over the next few weeks, we will be looking for probably I know it sounds improbable, but if the breadth improves from here, makes a new high on stronger volume, it leaves the door open for a shot to the upside in the Russell. So something we'll be watching for, and that's the analysis and the tools that I use, which is now in your hands. So between how do we get better use out of the scans, obviously you can take your scan information. We've done this before. Double click on the sector heading, and you can find out today's scan. How many buy signals when a weekly was in a buy mode did we get? Was there a heavy concentration? Well, there's not a lot of stuff that's in a weekly buy, but boy, if there is, I sure want to look at it, right? So we have some healthcare. We know that some of this is small cap biotech. $6 is kind of small cap, right? So Juno Therapeutics, we know that name, not so small cap, but again, wow, it sort of had a little breakout there on a buyout. And so we have to go through and take a look at some of these. Acadia Pharmaceutical for tomorrow. It's in a weekly buy. Here's your weekly buy. It hasn't come out of a weekly buy, and it's in a daily buy. Well, what do you think that we would be wanting to see? If it gave a buy signal above 29.78 or closed above that resistance, it would make me feel a little more warm and fuzzy that we could see a continuation, especially if we get some volume. That's how I'm reading this. It's not that it's not ambiguous. I don't say, well, one day since it's Tuesday and it's February, I don't take buy signals. Everything is right here in front of us. Ironically, Amazon, and if you go back and you look at the VXX program, which is ironic because VXX on Amazon, which has done a pretty good job. This is the one that, and we'll talk about this next week, but these exact settings are what's available on the website. I haven't changed these settings for that purpose. Unfortunately, it did a great job in generating some shorts and takes a profit. It generated a nice long, and it got flat. Now look at this. On a 60-minute basis, it's stuck between a 60-minute support and resistance. So if Amazon is going to see more upside, it would have to get a 60-minute close above the resistance. We'll see how that pans out for tomorrow. But it is on, ironically, our scans today as a daily buy in a weekly buy mode. Amazon, kind of interesting. So we can take a look at, here's Target. You got some of your, of course, consumer discretionary and service sector stocks. I see the very strong consistency of the same thing. A lot of stocks up against the same area of resistance. A close over that level would lead me to believe there's more upside coming, or possibly a re-challenge of those highs. So, or, you know, maybe there's more chop and flop ahead. I want to see stocks that have broken out above those highs. And so this is Red Hat, and it's certainly barreled through. So Red Hat tomorrow in the technology sector, we see, again, another name, NVIDIA, in a daily buy, but not above its highs. So we can take a better look and get more use out of our scans, I think, by utilizing not just what populates, but then capturing that information and then putting it right into your radar screen as a particular watch list. If you want to take, for example, get rid of some stocks, get rid of some of these things, and create, just go over here and let's get rid of one more here just for the heck of it. We're going to get rid of SMG. I'm going to go right here and I'm going to insert a label row and I'm going to say steel, S-T-O-C-K-S. So I can go and get rid of laws, get rid of everything else I want. Just delete it. So if I want to have steel stocks, or, you know, Rio's not a steel stock, but I'll keep it in there for the heck of it. NUE, enter. SCHN, enter. Obviously, CRS, will keep that in there too. The more stocks, the merrier in a sector. It gives us a better idea that there is performance or money flow going into that space. So which is the better stock in the space may depend on A, how the volume looks, the longer term analysis, and whether or not we've cleared overhead resistance. By the way, Schnitzer Steel did clear overhead resistance. It's a $34 stock. That concludes our time today. I did, believe it or not, answer about 6 of questions that were specific to what wanted to be targeted and talked about today. How do I get better use was a common theme of my scans and on my radar screen. What is the difference between LCC? I think it was very nice that one of our clients pointed out that, you know, whether or not you're used to gray and white or you can't see gray, how you can change that and get better use out of the indicators on your screen. With that said, I thank everyone for attending. Again, sorry for the difficulty that people had.